The sound of a pickaxe striking stone echoed through the narrow mine shaft, each impact reverberating like a heartbeat in the darkness. Bridget Newcomb's arms ached as she swung the tool again, her once delicate hands now calloused and raw. 6 months in the copper mines of Hecla, Montana Territory, had transformed her from a shopkeeper's wife into something barely recognizable. When she caught glimpses of herself in still water, a gaunt shadow with dust-caked hair and hollow eyes. The year was 1876, and the nation was celebrating its centennial while Bridget was burying her dreams alongside her husband. Thomas had died of typhoid fever last winter, leaving her with nothing but debts and desperation in a town where a woman alone had few options. "Keep digging," barked Harlan Wade, the mine foreman, his lantern casting grotesque shadows as he passed by. "Production's down, and Mr. Stanton wants another 20 feet by week's end." Bridget straightened her back, ignoring the stabbing pain between her shoulder blades. At 28, she felt decades older, especially when she remembered the life she'd once had. The small general store she and Thomas had run together. The cozy home with blue curtains she'd sewn herself. The baby they'd lost before it had a chance to draw breath. All gone now, replaced by 14-hour days in the suffocating dark and nights in a ramshackle boarding house where she collapsed into exhausted sleep. "You're slowing down, Newcomb," Wade sneered, stopping to watch her work. His eyes traveled over her worn work clothes in a way that made her skin crawl. "Remember our arrangement. You don't meet your quota, you don't get paid, and if you don't get paid—" "I'll meet it," she said, lifting the pickaxe again. The arrangement was barely better than indentured servitude. Wade had convinced the mine owner to hire her when no other woman worked the depths, claiming it as charity while charging her exorbitant fees for equipment and boarding. Each month, she sank deeper into debt rather than climbing out. "See that you do." He moved on, stopping to berate young Billy Thatcher, who, at barely 18, was still learning the grueling work. Bridget turned back to the wall of rock, blinking away the sting of sweat and tears. In the flickering lamplight, she could almost imagine Thomas beside her, whispering that things would get better. But ghosts couldn't swing pickaxes or pay debts. As darkness fell outside the mine, though in the tunnels, one could hardly tell the difference. Bridget's shoulders screamed for rest. Her quota remained unmet, meaning another day added to her endless term of service. The other miners, all men, began filing out for the shift change, some casting pitying glances her way, others deliberately avoiding her eyes. "Newcomb, my office before you leave," Wade called out as he passed. Bridget's stomach twisted with dread. Wade's office was little more than a storage alcove near the mine entrance, but it offered privacy that made her uneasy. She'd managed to avoid being alone with him thus far, but his patience was clearly wearing thin. She was gathering her courage to face him when a commotion at the mine entrance caught everyone's attention. Voices raised, followed by heavy footsteps approaching. "Where's Wade?" a deep voice demanded, the tone authoritative but unfamiliar. "Back office," someone replied. Bridget pressed herself against the tunnel wall as a tall figure strode past, lantern light gleaming off worn leather boots and spurs that jingled with each step. A cowboy, by the looks of him unusual in a mining town like Hecla. Curiosity overcame caution, and she followed at a distance, reaching the entrance to Wade's office just as raised voices erupted from within. "The deed's legal, Irving. I've got papers signed by Judge Watkins himself." Wade's voice was defensive. "Those papers don't give you the right to work people to death. I've been watching how you run this operation for 3 days, the stranger Irving responded. "And I don't like what I see." "What business is it of yours how I run things? You're just passing through." "My business is exactly that business. Stanton Mining Company is now under new management. Marcus Stanton sold his interests to the Irving-Blackwell Consortium last month. I'm Owen Irving, and I'm here to assess operations." Bridget's breath caught. New management. A wild, desperate hope flickered in her chest. "You can't just waltz in here and I can and I have. And my first order is to review all employee contracts. I've heard some disturbing rumors about debt servitude." Wade spluttered indignantly, but Owen Irving continued, his voice growing harder. "I want those contracts on this desk by morning, all of them, including any special arrangements." Bridget backed away quickly as footsteps approached the door. She nearly collided with Billy Thatcher, who was openly eavesdropping. "Did you hear that?" Billy whispered, eyes wide. "New boss." Before she could respond, the door swung open, and Wade stormed out, his face mottled with anger. He barely glanced at them before stalking away into the darkness of the mine. The man who emerged next made Bridget freeze in place. Owen Irving stood over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean-hipped in the way of men who spent their lives on horseback. His face was tanned beneath the dust of travel, with lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he was in his mid-30s. Those eyes, a startling blue, landed on her with sudden interest. "Madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "I don't believe I've had the pleasure." "Bridget Newcomb," she replied, suddenly conscious of her filthy work clothes and dirt-streaked face. "I work here." Something like surprise crossed his features. "In the mine itself, not the office?" "Yes, sir, for 6 months now." His expression hardened. "I see." He glanced at Billy, then back to her. "Both of you, come with me. I'd like to hear more about how operations are run around here." Bridget hesitated. "Mr. Wade is expecting me in his office." "Mr. Wade's authority has been superseded." Owen offered a small, reassuring smile. "You're speaking with the new authority now." For the first time in months, Bridget felt a flutter of something other than dread. Whether it was hope or merely curiosity about this stranger who had appeared like an apparition from another world, she couldn't say. But as she followed Owen Irving toward the mine entrance, she noticed something she hadn't seen in a very long time: natural light streaming in from outside, golden and warm against the perpetual darkness of the mine. It felt like an omen, though whether for good or ill remained to be seen. Owen Irving settled into the manager's office at the Hecla mine with the wariness of a man who'd seen his share of corrupt operations. The records before him told a disturbing story, one of exploitation and manipulation that made his jaw clench with anger. The contracts Wade had reluctantly provided confirmed his suspicions. Several miners, including Bridget Newcomb, were trapped in a cycle of debt they could never escape. "This is indentured servitude," he muttered to himself, examining Bridget's contract more closely. According to the paperwork, Thomas Newcomb had borrowed heavily from the company to expand their general store. After his death, Wade had somehow maneuvered his widow into assuming not only that debt but additional charges for training and accommodation at exorbitant rates. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, straightening the papers. Bridget Newcomb entered, her appearance markedly different from the previous evening. She'd clearly made an effort to clean up, her auburn hair neatly braided and her face scrubbed free of coal dust. Even in her simple, worn dress, she carried herself with quiet dignity. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Irving. Please, sit down." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "I've been reviewing your contract." Wariness clouded her green eyes as she perched on the edge of the seat. "Is there a problem?" "The problem, Mrs. Newcomb, is that this contract is barely legal and entirely unethical." He pushed the document toward her. "Are you aware that, under Wade's accounting system, your debt has increased by 30% since you began working here?" Her shoulders slumped slightly. "I suspected as much. He never provides clear accounting of what I owe." "That ends today." Owen leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. "I'm instituting immediate changes to all worker contracts. Wages will be increased to industry standard, and all debts will be recalculated at fair interest rates." Bridget stared at him, disbelief evident in her expression. "Why would you do that? It's not how things are done. It's how things will be done under my management." He stood, walking to the window that overlooked the mining complex. "The Irving-Blackwell Consortium operates differently. We believe treating workers fairly results in better productivity and loyalty." And Mr. Stanton agreed to this. Owen turned back to her with a slight smile. Marcus Stanton was eager to sell. He's in San Francisco now, living off the profits while we rebuild what he neglected. Bridget seemed to absorb this information slowly, as if afraid to believe it. What does this mean for me, specifically? It means several things. Owen returned to his desk, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper. First, your debt has been recalculated and substantially reduced. Second, you'll receive fair wages starting immediately with a portion applied to that debt. Third, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, I don't believe the mine is an appropriate workplace for you. Her face fell. I need the work, Mr. Irving. I have nowhere else to go. You misunderstand me, he quickly clarified. I'm not terminating your employment. I'm offering you a position more suited to your skills. According to your file, you and your husband ran the general store in town. Bridget nodded cautiously. We're establishing a company store for the miners and their families. It needs someone with experience to manage it. Owen watched her carefully. The position comes with living quarters above the shop and a significantly better salary. For a moment, Bridget appeared stunned into silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Are you serious? Entirely. Why me? You don't know anything about me. Owen considered her question. In truth, he'd been impressed by the quiet strength he'd observed in her, both when confronting Wade and in their subsequent conversations with other miners. There was something compelling about her resilience that had stayed with him. I know enough, he replied simply. You have experience, you're clearly intelligent, and the miners respect you. That's all I need to know. Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought them back. I don't know what to say yes. He smiled encouragingly. The store needs to be operational within 2 weeks. Bridget took a deep, steadying breath. Yes, she said finally. Thank you, Mr. Irving. Owen, please. He stood, extending his hand across the desk. We'll be working together quite closely. When her hand met his, he was struck by the contradiction, delicate fingers marked by calluses and old cuts, strength beneath vulnerability. Something unexpected stirred within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Bridget withdrew her hand first, a hint of color in her cheeks. When do I start? Tomorrow. I'll show you the building this afternoon. Owen cleared his throat, regaining his professional demeanor. There's much work to be done. As she left his office, Owen found himself standing at the window longer than necessary, watching her cross the yard toward the miners' quarters. Something about Bridget Newcomb intrigued him beyond professional interest, and that was dangerous territory indeed. He had come to Hecla to salvage a business investment, not to involve himself personally with the people here. His life and responsibilities lay elsewhere in Denver, where his business partner waited for results, and in the broader territories where their other ventures required his attention. Yet as he turned back to the stack of contracts on his desk, Owen couldn't shake the memory of relief and hope dawning in Bridget's eyes like someone stepping from darkness into light for the first time in too long. The building that would house the company store stood at the edge of the mining complex, a solid structure of stone and timber that had previously served as a warehouse. Over the next 2 weeks, Bridget watched it transform under her guidance and Owen's resources. Fresh paint, new shelving, a proper counter, and most importantly, inventory everything from basic foodstuffs to mining equipment, household necessities to small luxuries. The living quarters above underwent an even more dramatic change. What had been a dusty, abandoned space became a comfortable 3-room apartment with actual furniture, including a real bed that made Bridget want to weep after months of sleeping on a thin pallet in the women's boarding house. What do you think? Owen asked, standing in the doorway as Bridget ran her hand over the small dining table he'd procured from the carpenter in town. Will it serve? It's more than I could have hoped for, she admitted, turning to face him. I still can't quite believe this is happening. Over the past fortnight, she'd come to know Owen better. working alongside him daily as the store took shape. He was a complex man, decisive in business matters, yet surprisingly thoughtful in personal interactions. He listened when she spoke, actually considered her suggestions, and treated her with a respect she'd almost forgotten she deserved. "Believe it," he said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "The store opens tomorrow, and based on what I've seen, it will be a success under your management." "Our management," she corrected. "You've done as much work as I have. I'm merely investing in good people." Owen moved into the room, examining the neat arrangement of dishes on the open shelves. "This is your domain now." Bridget watched him, noting how he seemed both at ease and slightly restless in the domestic setting. "Will you stay in Hecla long?" she asked, realizing she'd been avoiding this question. A shadow crossed his features. "Not permanently. I have other operations that need attention." He turned to face her. "But I'll be here through winter at least. The mine needs significant improvements before I can consider it properly managed." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by confusion at her own reaction. Why should it matter to her how long Owen Irving remained in Hecla? Their relationship was professional, nothing more. Yet she couldn't deny the growing awareness between them, the way his gaze sometimes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. How her heart quickened when their hands accidentally touched while unpacking inventory. The conversations that extended well beyond business matters into personal territories. "That's good to hear," she said carefully. "The miners respect you. Things are already improving. Speaking of which," Owen reached into his coat pocket, "I have something for you." He produced a small brass key, the final touch, your own key to your own place. As he placed it in her palm, their fingers brushed, and that now familiar current passed between them. This time, neither of them immediately pulled away. "Thank you," Bridget said softly, looking up to find his blue eyes watching her intently. For a breathless moment, she thought he might say something more, might acknowledge whatever was growing between them. Instead, he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should let you settle in. Tomorrow will be busy." "Of course." She closed her fingers around the key. "Good night, Owen." "Good night, Bridget." He hesitated at the door. "You've done remarkable work here. You should be proud." After he left, Bridget stood alone in her new home, clutching the key like a talisman. 6 months ago, she'd been certain her life was over, that she would die in those mines as surely as Thomas had died of fever, slowly, painfully, without dignity. Now, impossibly, she had a second chance. And despite her best efforts to remain practical, she couldn't ignore that her thoughts of the future increasingly included the tall, serious man who'd made it all possible. The Hecla Company store opened to immediate success. The miners and their families, long accustomed to traveling 10 miles to the nearest town for supplies or paying inflated prices to traveling merchants, flocked to the well-stocked shelves. Bridget found herself working from dawn until dusk, but the work was fulfilling in a way mining never could be. October brought the first dusting of snow to the Montana territory, and with it, changes to the mining operation. Owen had brought in new safety equipment, established regular inspection routines, and most controversially, reduced the standard shift from 14 hours to 10. "He's cutting into profits," grumbled Wade, who had been demoted but not dismissed, as he counted out coins at Bridget's counter one evening. "And yet production is up," she countered, wrapping his purchases in brown paper. "Men work harder when they're not exhausted to collapse." Wade scowled. "You've changed your tune, now that you're up here in the light instead of down in the dark with the rest of us." "We all deserve better than what Stanton provided," Bridget said evenly, handing him his parcel. "Even you, Mr. Wade." The former foreman snatched his goods and stalked out, nearly colliding with Owen in the doorway. "Problem?" Owen asked, watching Wade's retreating back. "Nothing new, just resistance to change." Bridget began tidying the counter as the store emptied of the day's last customers. "Some people prefer the old ways, even when they're harmful." Owen hung his coat on the rack by the door and moved behind the counter, something he'd taken to doing more frequently in recent weeks, helping her close-up shop. Wade's been with the mine for 15 years. Change doesn't come easily after so long. You defend him now, after what he did to the miners, to me. Bridget couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Not defending, understanding. Owen began tallying the day's receipts, his handwriting neat and precise in the ledger. People become entrenched in systems, even bad ones. Breaking free requires courage. Bridget thought about this as they worked in companionable silence, completing the end-of-day tasks that had become a comfortable routine. Is that why you're here in Hecla, breaking free from something? Owen's hands stilled momentarily. What makes you ask that? Just something in the way you speak sometimes, like you're running towards something or away from something else. He gave her a measured look. You're observant. Shopkeepers have to be. She met his gaze steadily. You don't have to answer. Owen closed the ledger, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps I am, in a way. My father built a banking empire in Boston, expected me to follow in his footsteps, mahogany desks and board meetings. His mouth quirked in a half-smile. I chose a different path. The wild frontier, Bridget smiled. Quite the rebellion. My partner Patrick Blackwell and I started with one silver mine in Colorado, built from there. He leaned against the counter. What about you? Did you always plan to run a store in a mining town? Bridget laughed softly. Hardly. I was a school teacher in Illinois before I married Thomas. He had dreams of the West, fortunes to be made, adventures to be had. Her smile faded. Reality proved harsher than the dream. It often does, Owen agreed quietly, but sometimes reality surprises you in good ways too. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Over the weeks, their evening conversations had become the highlight of Bridget's days, a chance to share thoughts and stories with someone who genuinely listened. She'd learned about Owen's travels throughout the territories, his business philosophy, his preference for straightforward solutions. In turn, she'd found herself sharing memories of her childhood in Chicago, her brief teaching career, her marriage to Thomas. What she hadn't spoken of, what she scarcely admitted to herself, was how her feelings for Owen had evolved from gratitude to friendship to something deeper and more complicated. I should go, Owen said suddenly, breaking the moment. There's a shipment of timber arriving tomorrow for the new support beams. Of course. Bridget stepped back, creating distance between them. Good night, Owen. He hesitated at the door, seeming about to say something more, but only nodded before disappearing into the snowy evening. Alone, Bridget extinguished the lamps and climbed the stairs to her apartment. As she prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the small mirror above her washbasin and paused, truly seeing herself for the first time in months. The gaunt desperation had left her face, replaced by healthy color in her cheeks and a clarity in her green eyes that had been missing since Thomas's death. Her hair, once dulled by coal dust, shone auburn in the lamplight. At 28, she was young still, with perhaps a long life ahead. A life she was increasingly unable to imagine without Owen Irving in it. But what place could she have in his world? He was a businessman with enterprises across multiple territories, a man of ambition and means. She was a widow with nothing to her name but a position he had given her. When spring came and the mountain passes cleared, he would leave Hecla for his next venture. That was the reality she needed to accept. Winter descended on Hecla with a vengeance, blanketing the mining camp in heavy snow and sealing the mountain passes. The miners continued their work, now with better equipment and safer conditions, while Bridget's store became the heart of the small community, not just a place for commerce, but for gathering, sharing news, and finding warmth during the bitter cold. December brought preparations for Christmas, with Bridget organizing a community celebration at Owen's suggestion. The store was decorated with pine boughs and homemade ornaments, and even the most hardened miners seemed to soften as the holiday approached. We've never had a proper Christmas here before, Billy Thatcher told Bridget as he helped her hang garlands. At 18, the young miner had become something of an assistant at the store during his off hours. Mr. Stanton didn't hold with wasting time on festivities, as he called it. "Well, Mr. Irving sees value in community," Bridget replied, handing Billy another strand of popcorn to drape across the window. "A content workforce is a productive one." "Is that the only reason he's doing this?" Billy asked with unexpected perception. "Seems to me he cares about more than just productivity when it comes to certain people." Bridget felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mr. Irving cares about all his employees." Billy grinned knowingly but said nothing more as the door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and Owen himself, snow dusting his coat and hat. "The tree is on its way," he announced, stamping snow from his boots. "Chopped the biggest pine I could find near the creek. You cut it yourself?" Bridget asked, surprised. "With help," Owen clarified, removing his gloves. "Johnson and Peters volunteered. They're bringing it on the sledge." Billy excused himself to help with the tree, leaving Bridget and Owen alone in the decorated store. "This looks wonderful," Owen said, taking in the transformed space. "You've created something special here, Bridget." "We all needed some brightness in the middle of winter," she replied, adjusting a candle in the window. "Thank you for supporting it. Actually, I have another suggestion." Owen moved closer, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "There's to be a dance in Red Lodge next weekend, before the worst of the winter storms. I thought perhaps you might like to attend." Bridget stared at him, momentarily speechless. Red Lodge was 20 miles away, a proper town with an actual dance hall. "With the other miners?" she asked, not quite understanding. "With me." Owen's blue eyes held hers steadily. "As my guest." The implication was clear: this would not be a company outing but something more personal. A proper social engagement, perhaps even a courtship gesture. "I would like that," she said softly, her heart racing. Relief and pleasure crossed his features. "Good, that's good." The arrival of the Christmas tree interrupted any further conversation, but throughout the evening's preparations, Bridget caught Owen watching her with a new openness in his expression that sent warmth spreading through her despite the December chill. The Red Lodge dance marked a turning point. Dressed in her best gown, hastily altered from her pre-mining days, and supplemented with a new shawl Owen had procured from a passing merchant, Bridget felt almost like her old self again as Owen handed her into his rented sleigh. The journey through the snow-covered landscape, wrapped in thick blankets beside him, had a dreamlike quality. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences as they admired the pristine wilderness around them. Red Lodge itself was ablaze with lights when they arrived, the dance hall crowded with people from surrounding communities who had braved the winter roads for a night of music and socializing. "I haven't danced in years," Bridget confessed as Owen led her inside, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Neither have I," he admitted with a smile. "We'll remember together." And remember they did, moving somewhat awkwardly at first but soon finding their rhythm as the fiddles played. Owen proved to be a capable dancer, guiding her confidently through waltzes and reels. During a particularly lively number, he caught her around the waist and lifted her in a turn that left her breathless with laughter. "You've been hiding your talents, Mr. Irving," she teased when they paused for refreshments. "Only waiting for the right partner, Mrs. Newcomb," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers as he handed her a cup of punch. They were observed with curious interest by the local townspeople, and Bridget overheard whispers wondering who she was and what her relationship might be to the well-dressed businessman. For once, she didn't mind the attention. There was something affirming about being seen as a woman again, not just a widow or a worker. As the evening progressed, the music slowed, and Owen drew her closer for a waltz. His hand at her waist was respectful but intimate, his eyes reflecting the golden glow of the lanterns overhead. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "So am I." She found the courage to add, "I'm glad you asked me. I've wanted to for some time." His admission carried the weight of something deeper. There are complications in my situation, responsibilities elsewhere. I understand, Bridget said, though her heart constricted at the reminder of his eventual departure. Do you? His gaze was searching now, because I'm not certain I do. I came to Hecla with clear intentions: fix the mine, improve profitability, move on to the next project. Simple. And now, the music swelled around them as he considered his answer. Now I find myself reconsidering what matters most. Before she could respond, the dance ended, and they were swept into conversations with others. But throughout the remainder of the evening, a new awareness hummed between them, an acknowledgement that whatever was developing between them could no longer be ignored. The ride back to Hecla was quieter, both of them wrapped in their thoughts as the sleigh glided through the moonlit snow. When they reached the store, Owen insisted on seeing her to her door. At the top of the stairs, Bridget turned to thank him for the evening, but the words died on her lips at the intensity in his expression. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, Owen raised his hand to her cheek, his thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw. I find myself thinking of you far more than is wise, he confessed, his voice low. Even when I should be focused on business, my thoughts return to you. Bridget's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. I've tried not to think of you that way, she admitted. You'll be leaving when spring comes. And if I found reason to stay? His question hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Is there such a reason? She dared to ask. Instead of answering with words, Owen leaned down and kissed her gently at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, raising her hand to his chest and leaning into him, the kiss deepened into something that sent heat spiraling through her body despite the winter chill. When they finally parted, both somewhat breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I believe I've found several reasons, he murmured. That kiss changed everything and nothing. Outwardly, their daily routines continued. Bridget managed the store, Owen oversaw improvements to the mine, and the community prepared for Christmas. But privately, a new dimension had opened in their relationship, expressed in lingering looks, brief touches when others weren't watching, and conversations that stretched late into the evening. Owen began courting her properly, as much as their circumstances and the isolated mining camp allowed. He brought her small gifts: a book of poetry, a jar of honey from a trading post, wildflowers preserved between glass frames. They took walks through the snowy forest when weather permitted, and he shared more about his past, his strained relationship with his banking father, his friendship with Patrick Blackwell that had led to their business partnership, his dreams for the future. Patrick and I have different visions, Owen explained one evening as they sat by the fire in Bridget's small apartment. He wants to expand continuously: more mines, more lumber mills, more ranches. I've begun to question whether bigger is always better. What do you want? Bridget asked, watching the firelight play across his features. Owen considered the question seriously. Sustainability, operations that benefit communities rather than exploit them, and lately. He met her eyes, a place to call home. The Christmas celebration brought the entire mining community together in a way Bridget had never seen during Stanton's ownership. The massive pine tree stood in the center of the store, decorated with candles, popcorn strings, and handmade ornaments contributed by miners' families. Even the bachelor miners had made an effort, crafting simple decorations from materials at hand. Children who rarely visited the mining complex came with their mothers, eyes wide at the treats Bridget had prepared. Music from a battered fiddle and harmonica filled the air, and for a few hours, the harshness of mining life gave way to celebration. Owen moved through the gathering with easy authority, speaking with everyone, making sure all had enough to eat and drink. Bridget watched him with a fullness in her heart that both thrilled and frightened her. She was falling in love with him, perhaps had already fallen despite all her practical resolutions to guard her heart. Later, after the last guests had departed and they stood alone beside the tree, Owen presented her with a small package wrapped in silver paper. "Merry Christmas," he said softly. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When she opened it, she found a tiny painted miniature of the store with its distinctive green door. "Your new beginning," Owen explained. A reminder that darkness doesn't last forever. Tears pricked at Bridget's eyes as she looked up at him. "It's beautiful, thank you." "Let me," he offered, taking the necklace and moving behind her. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck as he fastened the clasp, sending shivers down her spine. When he turned her to face him again, his expression was serious. "I care for you, Bridget, more than I anticipated. More than might be wise given my obligations elsewhere. And I care for you." The admission felt both terrifying and freeing. "But you're right about your obligations. You have a life beyond Hecla. A life that's feeling increasingly hollow." He took her hands in his. "I need to return to Denver in February. Business matters that can't be conducted by telegram, but I'll come back." "You don't have to make promises," she began, but he stopped her with a gentle finger to her lips. "I'm not promising out of obligation. I'm promising because I cannot imagine not returning to you." His kiss tasted of possibility and hope, emotions Bridget had thought forever buried in the mines alongside her old life. As his arms encircled her, pulling her against the solid warmth of his chest, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps this unexpected gift of love was truly hers to keep. January brought the harshest weather of the season, with blizzards that confined the community to their homes for days at a time. The store remained open, becoming more essential than ever as supplies dwindled and spirits needed lifting. Owen had taken lodgings at the only boarding house in the mining camp that offered private rooms, but he spent most evenings with Bridget, sometimes in the company of others, sometimes alone by her fire, talking late into the night. Their relationship deepened through these conversations, building a foundation of understanding and shared values beneath the growing attraction. In the quietest moments, when the wind howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Bridget sometimes caught Owen watching her with an expression that made her heart skip, a look of such tender consideration that it almost frightened her with its intensity. February approached too quickly. With it came Owen's necessary departure for Denver, a journey that would take him through treacherous winter passes and keep him away for at least 3 weeks. "I've left explicit instructions with Johnson," Owen told her the night before he was to leave, referring to the experienced miner he'd promoted to foreman after demoting Wade. "He'll oversee daily operations, but any significant decisions will wait for my return." Bridget nodded, trying to hide her apprehension. 3 weeks was not so very long, yet the prospect of his absence left a hollow feeling in her chest. "I'm sure everything will run smoothly." They sat before the fire in her apartment, closer than propriety might strictly allow, her hand clasped in his. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving an eerie stillness broken only by occasional creaks as the building settled. "I want you to have this while I'm gone." Owen reached into his pocket and produced a small brass key. "To my house in Denver." Bridget stared at him in confusion. "I don't understand. It's presumptuous, perhaps." He turned the key over in his palm. "But I want you to know that I'm serious about us, about a future together." Owen. She couldn't find words to express the tumult of emotions his gesture provoked. "I'm not asking for an answer now," he hastened to add. "Only that you consider it. When I return, we can discuss what comes next." Bridget looked from the key to his earnest face. In the month since he'd arrived in Hecla, Owen Irving had become central to her world, not just as her employer or benefactor, but as the man who had awakened feelings she thought died with Thomas. Yet the practical side of her nature couldn't help but question. "Your life is in Denver," she said softly. "Mine is here now. Lives can change, mine already has." He closed her fingers around the key. "Just think about it." Their goodbye the next morning was brief by necessity. The sledge that would take Owen to the nearest railway station wouldn't wait for lengthy farewells. Yet in the moment before he climbed aboard, he pulled her close for a kiss that carried the weight of all they hadn't yet said to each other. 3 weeks, he promised. Watch for my telegram. As the sledge disappeared into the winter landscape, Bridget touched the locket at her throat, taking comfort in its solid presence. 3 weeks. She could manage 3 weeks. She hadn't counted on Harlan Wade's resentment festering into something dangerous. The first signs of trouble came a week after Owen's departure. Wade, who had continued working as a regular miner after his demotion, began spreading rumors that Owen had no intention of returning, that he had used the community for his own profit and would abandon them once winter ended. "He's done it before," Wade told anyone who would listen at the saloon. Ask around about the Irving Blackwell operations in Colorado. They strip a place bare and move on. Most miners dismissed his claims as the bitterness of a man who'd lost his authority, but seeds of doubt were planted. When a telegram arrived for Bridget from Owen, briefly delayed by weather in Denver, Wade seized on it as evidence. "Already finding reasons to extend his stay, isn't he?" he remarked loudly in the store as Bridget read the message. "Denver's got finer company than Hecla, that's certain." "Mr. Irving's business dealings are none of your concern," Bridget replied coolly, tucking the telegram into her pocket. "Your credit account is due for payment, Mr. Wade." His eyes narrowed. "Getting mighty comfortable in your position, aren't you? Might want to remember who put you there and who can take it away." The threat lingered in the air after he left. Bridget tried to dismiss it as empty words, but an uneasy feeling persisted. 2 days later, disaster struck. A section of the mine that had been designated for reinforcement collapsed during the night shift, trapping 3 miners including young Billy Thatcher. The cave-in wasn't severe enough to cause immediate fatalities, but it blocked the primary exit tunnel. The community mobilized instantly. Johnson organized rescue teams, working in shifts to clear the debris while maintaining communication with the trapped men through a narrow air shaft. Bridget kept the store open around the clock, providing food and supplies to the workers. Hours stretched into a full day with progress painfully slow. The trapped miners remained alive but increasingly desperate as air quality deteriorated. During a brief break, Johnson confided his concerns to Bridget. "Wade's saying we should blast through," he explained, exhaustion evident in his voice. "Says it's the fastest way." "Isn't that dangerous?" Bridget asked, alarmed. "Could it cause more collapse?" Johnson nodded grimly. "Too risky with the current instability." "I told him no, but he's gathering support. Says I'm too cautious without Irving here to back me." "What do we do?" "Keep digging the safe way." Johnson straightened his tired shoulders. "And pray we're fast enough." Bridget sent an urgent telegram to Owen in Denver, but there was no guarantee when or if it would reach him. In the meantime, the situation at the mine grew more tense as Wade openly challenged Johnson's authority. By the second day, the mining camp had divided into factions. Those loyal to Owen's methods supported Johnson's careful approach. Others, swayed by Wade's arguments about the diminishing air supply for the trapped men, began to demand more drastic action. Late that afternoon, Bridget was distributing coffee to the exhausted rescue workers when she overheard Wade addressing a group of miners. "Johnson's too afraid to make the hard choice," he was saying. "But I'm not. Those men have hours left, not days. We need to blast, and we need to do it now." "The support structure isn't ready," argued Peterson, one of the senior miners loyal to Johnson. "You could kill them all." "They'll die anyway if we don't act," Wade countered. "Irving's not here to stop us. I say we take matters into our own hands." Bridget stepped forward, anger overcoming caution. "Mr. Irving put Johnson in charge for a reason. His methods have already made this mine safer than it ever was under your management." Wade turned to her with a sneer. "Look, who's speaking for the absent boss? Tell me, Mrs. Newcomb, what exactly did you do to earn your cushy position? Must have been quite the service." The crude implication brought gasps from the miners around them. Bridget felt heat rise in her face, not from embarrassment but from fury. "I earned my position through hard work and competence," she said evenly. "Two qualities you've consistently lacked, Mr. Wade. That's why you were demoted." Wade's face darkened with rage. Before anyone could react, he lunged forward and grabbed Bridget's arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You uppity bitch," he never finished the sentence. A fist connected with his jaw, sending him staggering backward into the snow. Bridget whirled to find Owen standing there, his expression colder than the Montana winter as he flexed his hand. "Touch her again," Owen said with deadly calm, "and it will be the last thing you do in Hecla." The miners stared in stunned silence at Owen's unexpected appearance. He looked travel-worn and exhausted, but his authority was undiminished as he surveyed the scene. "Johnson," he called, spotting the foreman emerging from the mine entrance. "Report." As Johnson quickly explained the situation, Bridget fought to calm her racing heart. Owen was here somehow, impossibly. He had returned early. "We continue with the safe approach," Owen decided after hearing the options. "But we double the teams and work continuously." "Wade," he fixed the former foreman with a hard stare, "you're suspended pending review. Leave the mining complex now." For a moment, it seemed Wade might protest, but something in Owen's expression must have convinced him of the futility. With a final glare at Bridget, he stalked away. Only when the crisis was being properly managed did Owen turn to Bridget, his eyes softening as they took in her pale face. "Are you hurt?" "No," she assured him, "just shaken. How did you get here? The telegram couldn't have reached you yet." "It didn't." He guided her away from the curious ears of the miners. "I finished my business early and started back as soon as the pass was declared safe. Barely made it through before another storm closed it. Relief and something deeper washed over Bridget. You came back. I told you I would." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Nothing could have kept me away." The rescue operation continued through the night, with Owen working alongside the miners, refusing rest until progress was certain. By dawn, they had cleared enough debris to create a passage. Billy Thatcher and the other trapped miners emerged filthy and weak, but alive, greeted by cheers from the entire community. Only when the rescued men had been seen by the camp doctor did Owen allow himself to be led away by Bridget, nearly stumbling with exhaustion as they made their way to her apartment above the store. "You need rest," she insisted, helping him remove his coat. "When did you last sleep?" "On the train, briefly." He sank into a chair by her fire, fatigue etched in every line of his face. "I was concerned about getting back." "Because of the mine?" she asked, bringing him hot coffee. Owen shook his head, his eyes finding hers despite his exhaustion. "Because of you." The simple honesty of his statement caught at her heart. As she knelt beside his chair, Owen reached out to touch her cheek with a gentleness that belied the strength he'd shown confronting Wade. "I realized something in Denver," he said quietly. "All the business matters that seemed so important. They pale in comparison to what I've found here, what I've found with you." Bridget covered his hand with her own. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you." The words hung in the air between them, momentous yet somehow inevitable. "I think I began falling in love with you that first day in the mine when you stood your ground despite everything you'd endured." Tears filled Bridget's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself." "Don't be afraid." Owen drew her up until she was sitting on his lap, his arms encircling her. "I know we've both lost things, people we loved before, but that doesn't mean we can't find love again." As his lips met hers, Bridget felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was not betraying Thomas or dishonoring his memory. This was embracing life and love when she'd thought both forever lost to her. Later, as Owen finally slept in her bed propriety set aside in favor of the comfort of being together, Bridget watched the rise and fall of his chest, and marveled at how completely her life had transformed in less than a year. From the darkness of the mines to the light of new love, from despair to hope, she knew challenges remained. Wade's hostility would not disappear overnight. Owen's business interests extended beyond Hecla. Their different backgrounds might present obstacles neither had yet considered. But as dawn broke over the mountains, painting her small room with golden light, Bridget knew with certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. The mine disaster and its successful resolution changed the dynamics in Hecla. Owen's leadership during the crisis solidified his standing in the community, while Wade's actions eroded what little support he had maintained. When Owen formally dismissed him a week later, few protested. "He'll make trouble elsewhere," Johnson predicted as they watched Wade's wagon disappear toward the nearest town. "Men like that always do." "Perhaps," Owen agreed, "but not here, not anymore." Spring approached gradually, the snow retreating up the mountainsides as days lengthened and temperatures rose. With it came decisions about the future both for the mine and for Owen and Bridget. "Patrick has agreed to buy out my interest in our other ventures," Owen told Bridget one evening as they walked along the creek, now free of ice. In exchange for sole ownership of the Hecla operation. Bridget stopped, turning to face him. "You're staying permanently, if that's what you want." He took both her hands in his. "I meant what I said about finding a home. For me, home is wherever you are. But your partnership with Blackwell, you've worked together for years. Are you certain?" Owen smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Patrick understands. He's expanding east toward Chicago anyway. Our interests were already diverging. And the mine will continue operating, but with changes. I'm planning to diversify a sawmill on the eastern property, possibly some ranching operations in the valley. Make Hecla more sustainable for the future." The future. The word carried such different connotations now than it had when Bridget was working in the mine's depths, each day an exercise in survival rather than living. "There's something else," Owen continued, a hint of nervousness entering his voice. "Something I've wanted to ask you since I returned from Denver." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Bridget's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a gold ring set with a modest but beautifully cut diamond. "I know it's been less than a year since we met," Owen said, his blue eyes earnest as he looked at her. "Some might say it's too soon, but I think when you find the person you're meant to be with, time becomes less relevant than certainty." He dropped to one knee there beside the rushing creek, still holding the open box. "Bridget Newcomb, I love you. I want to build a life with you here in Hecla if that's what you want, or anywhere else you might choose. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Bridget could only stare at him, overwhelmed by emotion. Images flashed through her mind, the dark mine shaft where she'd nearly lost herself. The moment Owen had first offered her a way back to the light, the gradual rebuilding of her life, and finally, the growing love between them that had healed parts of her she'd thought permanently broken. "Yes," she said, her voice catching. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had always belonged there. When Owen rose and pulled her into his arms, his kiss was a promise of all they would build together, a future neither could have imagined a year earlier. They were married in early May, with the mountains still snow-capped but wildflowers beginning to carpet the valley. The entire mining community attended, along with residents from neighboring settlements who had heard the remarkable story of the mine owner and the widow he'd helped rise from darkness. Billy Thatcher, fully recovered from his ordeal in the mine collapse, served as a witness. "Knew it from the start," he told Bridget with a grin. "The way he looked at you when you weren't watching, man was smitten." The ceremony took place outside the company store, a fitting location, Bridget thought, for it represented the beginning of her new life. She wore a dress of pale blue silk that Owen had ordered from Denver, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a formal veil. Owen, standing tall and proud in a new suit, watched her approach with an expression of such open adoration that whispers rippled through the assembled guests. This was no marriage of convenience or calculation. Anyone could see the love between them. "I thought my life was over when Thomas died," Bridget said softly during their vows. "You showed me it was only beginning." You pulled me from darkness into light, and I promise to walk in that light with you for all our days." Owen's voice was steady but emotion-filled as he responded, "You think I saved you, but in truth, you saved me as well. From a life of wandering without purpose, from success without meaning. I promise to cherish every day of the life we build together." Their kiss sealed promises made not just with words, but with the journey that had brought them together, a journey from separate sorrows to shared joy. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing in the open area before the mine offices. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities. "Mrs. Irving," Owen murmured in her ear as they swayed together beneath the stars, "how does it sound?" "Perfect," Bridget replied, resting her head against his chest. "Absolutely perfect." Later that night, as they stood on the porch of the small but charming house Owen had purchased and renovated as a wedding gift, Bridget looked out over the mining camp, now a growing community, and marveled at how different it appeared from her first days in Hecla. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his arms encircling her from behind. "That life takes unexpected turns," she answered honestly. "A year ago I was at my lowest point, certain nothing good would ever happen again. Now, he prompted, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Now I understand that darkness doesn't last forever. That sometimes, when you least expect it, someone reaches into that darkness and pulls you into the light." Owen turned her in his arms, his expression serious in the moonlight. "We'll build something lasting here, Bridget. Something that will remain long after we're gone." "We already have," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "We've built a love that saved us both." As they crossed the threshold into their new home and their new life together, Bridget felt the weight of the past finally release its hold. Thomas would always occupy a place in her heart, just as Owen's previous losses shaped who he had become. But the future stretched before them, now bright with promise, rich with possibility, and illuminated by the love that had found them both when they needed it most. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter echoed across the yard as Bridget watched from the porch of their expanded home. 5-year-old Thomas, named for her first husband but with his father's blue eyes and determined chin, was teaching his 3-year-old sister Elizabeth how to feed the chickens without scaring them. "Not so fast, Lizzie," he instructed with the serious authority of an older brother. "You have to be gentle, or they'll run away." Bridget smiled, one hand absently caressing the slight swell of her belly where their third child was just beginning to show. Life in Hecla had flourished alongside her family, the mining operation now just one facet of a diversified community that included the sawmill, ranching operations, and even a small school where Bridget taught 3 days a week. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention to the road, where Owen appeared on his favorite stallion. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of him still caused her heart to quicken. He dismounted with the easy grace that had first caught her attention, pausing to ruffle Thomas's hair and swing Elizabeth into his arms before continuing to the porch. "How are my girls today?" he asked, leaning down to kiss Bridget before settling beside her. "We're well. Your son has appointed himself chicken keeper and is training his apprentice." She nodded toward the children, now thoroughly involved in their task. "And how is our newest addition?" Owen placed his hand over hers on her belly. "Active. Dr. Collins says everything looks perfect." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching their children and the bustling community beyond. Hecla had grown to a proper town now, with a real church, additional shops and homes spreading up the valley. The darkness and danger of the old mine operation seemed like a distant memory, though Bridget never forgot where her journey had begun. "I received a letter today," Owen said after a while, "from Patrick Blackwell. How is he? Prospering in Chicago as usual." "But that's not the interesting part." Owen turned to face her. "He mentioned running into Harlan Wade." Bridget stiffened slightly. They hadn't heard that name in years, not since he'd left Hecla in disgrace. "What happened to him?" "Nothing good." He tried to implement the same exploitative practices at several operations back east, eventually got himself arrested for fraud. Owen shook his head. Patrick said he looked like a broken man. Despite everything Wade had done, Bridget felt a twinge of pity. "Some people never learn to step into the light," she said softly. "They become so accustomed to darkness they think it's all that exists." Owen's arm tightened around her shoulders. "You've become quite the philosopher, Mrs. Irving." "I've had good reason to contemplate the nature of darkness and light." She leaned into his embrace, watching as Thomas patiently corrected his sister's enthusiastic but clumsy attempt to gather eggs. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Bridget and Owen stood on their porch as had become their custom, looking out over the valley as stars emerged in the darkening sky. The mining complex was visible in the distance, now a modern, safe operation that had become a model for others in the territory. "Did you ever imagine this?" Bridget asked, gesturing to the thriving community around them. "When you first came to Hecla," Owen considered the question. "I imagined improving the mine, making it profitable. But this," he shook his head, "this exceeds anything I could have envisioned, especially you, especially our family." The genuine wonder in his voice touched her deeply. Despite his business success, Owen had never lost his capacity for gratitude or his awareness of how close they had both come to missing the life they now shared. "You remember what you said to me that first day in the mine office?" Bridget asked. "When you told me about the company store position," Owen smiled, drawing her closer against the evening chill. "I believe I said something about darkness not lasting forever. You did." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that 5 years had added around his eyes, lines of laughter and life lived fully. "You couldn't have known how prophetic those words would be." "Perhaps some part of me did know," he replied thoughtfully. "Something in you called to something in me from that first moment, as if we recognized each other somehow." The sentiment might have seemed fanciful from anyone else, but Bridget understood exactly what he meant. Their connection had always felt like recognition, two souls finding in each other exactly what they needed to become whole. "I love you, Owen Irving," she said simply, "for pulling me into the light, for showing me how to live again." "I love you, Bridget Irving," he answered, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness that had marked their first embrace. "For teaching me what truly matters, for giving me a home." As they stood together under the vast Montana sky, Bridget thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, from the depths of a copper mine to the heights of happiness she'd never dared hope for again. Life would bring more challenges, more joys, more sorrows, but they would face them together in the light they had created. And that light, she knew with absolute certainty, would never fade.